In this video, we describe the components of an AAI instance before we demo the respective installations. At its core, we find the AAI server, which relies on a JBoss web server and a web-based user interface. We rely on a number of config files, as well as a web-based interface called the config tool to set configuration settings. AAI sources operations data from supported scheduling solutions. The types of integrations vary based on the scheduler. For our purposes, we'll show the connector framework, since this supports a number of integrations like Atomic and Control-M, and we'll use it to integrate AAI with Atomic, since this is also a Broadcom product. Each integration is covered in dedicated learning modules, and we recommend attending the ones that you're interested in. Then the video looks at the file systems. We'll explore the various directories and key files for each component on both Unix and Windows platforms. In particular, we'll show where to find the logs for just about every AAI function, server, startup procedure, and so forth. We'll briefly describe Windows services and Unix processes. Let's start with a presentation of the architecture. The AAI solution supplements automation. This means that you'll be starting with a scheduling tool, say Autosys, CA7, or Atomic Automation. AAI is layered on top to provide a wealth of functions otherwise lacking in the native scheduling platform: reporting, critical path management, service level agreement analysis, alerting, and much more. The core component of the instance is the AAI server. Its two main infrastructure elements are the JBoss web server and the database. To install AAI, we run a simple installer which creates the AAI file system and generates the assets to deploy the data structures to a database. These assets come in the form of scripts, which we have to execute. It also deploys the config tool, a simple web-based UI in which we can fine-tune all settings for the server. A connection exists between AAI and the supported scheduling solutions for data acquisition. Specifics vary with the scheduler. Some scheduling solutions, such as Autosys, are natively reachable over JDBC. Others require additional elements. For this course, we'll rely on a Broadcom automation platform, Atomic Automation. This, along with other products such as Control-M and Broadcom's ESP, uses the connector framework, an independent technical component we present in this course. The connector framework is a separate software component that should be installed on a dedicated system. It has its own file system, log, and server processes. The connector communicates with the AAI server over HTTP and acquires data from Atomic via the scheduler's REST API, although again, the acquisition conduit varies with the scheduler. We use the AAI Web UI to configure a dedicated connection to each scheduling solution. The connector extracts operational data, essentially execution records, and object definitions like jobs, schedules, and executions to build the AAI data. Dynamic execution data is sourced on very short cycles, say every 15 or 30 seconds, while stable object data is extracted on longer cycles, say once a day. Let's start with AAI and its file system. This includes the config tool. When you install with the default settings, the Automation Analytics Intelligence directory is created either under the C drive or in /opt. We start with the JBoss directory. This is the web server file system, which contains all the executables, libraries, and configuration files, as well as the AAI web apps WAR and EAR files that get deployed at installation. We'll come back to this. The config directory contains the configuration tools file system with essentially some libraries and the log. The config tool is a fairly simple utility, and so the directory isn't particularly extensive. This is covered in the content dedicated to the config tool. The next directory contains the AAI command line interfaces file system. This is where CLI commands and CLI config files are stored. This is covered in the content dedicated to the command line interface. The connectors directory contains the necessary executables and configuration files to deploy connectors. This is covered in the content dedicated to the TLS implementation. Note that connector framework software and the Tomcat-based connectors associated with IBM products should not be installed on the same systems as either AAI and certainly not the schedulers. They should be given dedicated systems. Some additional components will be required by the mainframe schedulers CA7 and IWSZ, which are covered in those learning programs. The daemon folder is Windows specific. It contains the service that gets added to the list of Windows services when AAI is installed. Import-export contains specific tools to migrate data in and out of AAI instances. This is covered in the content dedicated to import and export. The script directory contains the scripts necessary to deploy, update, or delete AAI's data structures in the hosting database. This is covered in the content dedicated to installing AAI. Let's consider some of the files in the root AAI directory. You'll find the executable to initiate AAI. This starts the JBoss server and connects to the data source. There's also the uninstall executable. There are other directories such as documentation and some script examples specific to Autosys. These aren't as important, and you'll be able to research them on your own time. Let's focus for a bit on the JBoss directory since the web server is the core element of the solution. Here you find a number of directories that contain all the functional elements of the web server, application server files, the binaries, and so forth. All of this gets installed when JBoss is deployed, irrespective of AAI, and so we won't dwell on it. If you want to know more, we recommend reading the documentation written by Red Hat, who owns the products. Let's focus on the standalone directory since this contains all the assets deployed to JBoss at the installation of AAI. Under JBoss standalone deployments, you find the set of AAI WAR and EAR files. These are the web archive files that are loaded into the web server. AAI UI is the web interface. There's also the custom condition generator, which we cover elsewhere, subscription and telemetry for licensing, and JAWS and Terma, which are additional AAI modules that are part of the overall solution. Under JBoss standalone log, you find the AAI logs. JAWS.log traces all AAI events, and server.log contains the output of the startup procedure. The log directory contains a multitude of logs to capture every functional aspect of AAI, export, security, maintenance procedures, telemetry, and so forth. These are described in our Advanced Administrator course. Note that the config tool log is found under the config directory, and the connector framework log is found in the logs directory of the connector file system. Under JBoss standalone configuration, you find one important file, standalone.xml, which we use to deploy and configure the TLS implementation where AAI and other components should be accessed over HTTPS. Let's consider the Windows services and Unix processes. In Windows, things are simple. There are two services which are created at installation for AAI and the connector on their respective systems. They can be set to automatic, which auto-starts both components at boot. The config tool does not have a service. In Unix, we have three process groups, JBoss, Atomic-Connector, and Config, for AAI, the connector framework, and the config tool respectively. The process associated with the config tool is the web swing process. We'll come back to this. For users upgrading from earlier versions, we have two major developments in the version 24 Delta. First, the entire report server technical component has been removed. The entire system dedicated to the report server, the Postgres database, and the Jasper system are no longer needed. TLS SSL is no longer an issue for the report server. It's now fully integrated into JBoss as a simple servlet. It's accessible directly in the web UI as well. Make sure you back up your reports before the upgrade. The other major development is the elimination of the config tool standalone technical components. The config tool is now web-based. By default, AAI uses port 8080 and the config tool port 8088 since it's on a different application server. We're going to come back to this. This has been discussed in prior releases. We've been gradually moving away from the thick clients on both platforms. In version 24, it's completely gone.